So, you haven't been reading Vigilantes. And maybe today you read those scans and you're completely confused. This is not a video for explaining the entire backstory that is in Vigilantes. This video is the case for Vigilantes. You see, for a while now, it's been a contested topic as to whether or not Vigilantes is canon, though it's been directly stated that Vigilantes is canon. And one of the reasons why Horikoshi has lower page numbers for his chapters is because he works on the anime and communicates with them. He works and writes with the movie. He works on the OVAs that they make for like Jump Festa. He makes it a point to draft, obviously for the current ongoing My Hero Academia manga. He is involved with things with the Team Ups manga. He's personal friends with the My Hero Academia Smash authors, so obviously they talk. And he also has to work with Vigilantes. So these are 7 projects in which Horikoshi is entrenched that are part of his universe that he makes it a point to be involved with. This means that when you have content that does not contradict the material within the anime, Vigilantes, etc., you know it is canon. And the important thing here is that none of it contradicts the actual manga. So barring like Team Up Mission, which I think is supposed to be the only non-canon one. And even then, the way the characters interact with each other, you're supposed to interpret the dynamics as canon, but the missions themselves might not be. Kind of like how Smash is a parody, but you can still take away certain little bits of information within the context of that, because it does highlight certain things that come into play later. Anyway, so there's a couple of reasons that you should be reading Vigilantes. I'll just start with the first one, which is there's a 6-chapter, 7-chapter arc dedicated to Aizawa's backstory. That explains the panel that you didn't understand in the scan today, or won't understand when you read the Viz, or in general, just you won't get it. If you don't know Aizawa's backstory, you will not understand the content that's going on necessarily. You will only be able to go, oh, okay, this happened. Notice I'm not even going to explain to you what happened in this week's chapter because the Viz isn't out yet. But reasons why you should be watching Vigilantes or reading, sorry. Here's the thing. Just starting from the beginning, there's a lot of things that are set up that happen within the main story that if you read Vigilantes are far less jarring. One of them being everyone's biggest complaint about joint training, not even being the pacing, but rather the development of the quirks. The protagonist of... or let's look at My Villain Academia, where people thought it was odd that Shigaraki's quirk leveled up. Or they thought it was odd that Toga used her quirk in a new way. And the thing that is very much like a hot point of the Koichi, who's the main character of My Hero Vigilantes, is that he didn't understand his quirk properly. And this comes into play later. So the idea of and the way his quirk actually functions and is used is so entirely different than what he thought it was from the time he was a child due to certain events that he spent over 18 years not actually knowing what his quirk properly was. So in the same way, if you had been reading this when Toga transformed and, did Uraraka's power, you would have been like, oh, maybe that's always been a power we just haven't seen yet, or she's been figuring out more and more. Because it's not always necessarily quirk evolution, it's sometimes just misunderstanding of quirk, which was also the case for Shigaraki. If you remember, he was subconsciously suppressing his powers ever since he was a kid because of the whole his family fell to pieces. So that bit of writing and that rule and that execution within the narrative already existed and had been established within Vigilantes. You just needed to read the side series so you would already be familiar with the potential of that occurring. Or you would have already seen it actually happen, not just something that would be considered speculative. The next point is that a lot of people have a desire or they think that Deku should have become a hero without quirks. It kind of does a very good job of building the case for how being a hero without a quirk would actually play out and how hard it would actually be to be a hero without a quirk, to the extent where a lot of the things that the character does are basically really illegal. like hella illegal. So being recognized as an official hero, while is pretty much not going to happen if you don't have a quirk, just due to the way you would have to fight and all the things you have to do to make sure it even functions. You don't. And in addition to that, with Deku's goal being to be the greatest hero like All Might, it's definitively impossible to be All Might level without a quirk in My Hero Academia. This isn't a Justice League crossover where they need to find a way to make Batman really OP because he's one of the main characters and one of the reasons people buy it. This is a series much more detached from having to placate or feed into a certain fan base's notions of how the fights need to be because one of them's more popular. So you get an explanation of that. In addition to that, if you wanted to see more about Stain and learn more about who he was and where he started off, you get the background of Stain. The second volume has a huge thing or storyline, following Stendhal at the time and what leads to him picking up even more conviction and explains why Stain doesn't have a nose. So if you wanted the story of why Stain doesn't have a nose, it's in Vigilantes. Now, if you like Fat Gum, this is another reason why you should be reading Vigilantes, because if you watch the My Hero Academia anime, they recently started talking about Fat Gum and his investigations with drugs back in the day, and that there's literally an entire arc dedicated to Fat Gum, a racer, and a police officer investigating some trigger drug trading, so you can kind of see where that actually came into play, what was going on, get more context. In addition to that, if you have already decided you like Fat Gum, or if you read the manga and you liked Fat Gum, more Fat Gum content. In addition to that, if you like Eraserhead, but you think Eraserhead doesn't get enough time because he spends a lot of time being a teacher, you get to see Eraserhead do hero work in Vigilantes. So there's like fan service reasons, but then there's also the fact that certain things within the context are set up. For example, the My Hero Academia Rising movie that's coming out, The Villain 9, is actually, there's one of his predecessors, more than likely, is named Six and is a character within My Hero Academia Vigilantes, and that existed. That chapter came out, I think, during My Villain Academia, a little while either before or after we got that spread where it was kind of showing everyone. In fact, if you remember, 9 is in the manga panel spread in My Hero Academia's like main storyline, which would to affirm that the movie was going to be canon. But then 6 being a part of Vigilantes and this villain being named 9, and then certain aspects about 6, like for example, the fact that 6 is also tied to various what are essentially prototype Nomu. We get earlier prototypes of those being sent out. In fact, there's actually a very particular type of Nomu that appears in My Hero Academia Vigilantes that might actually be a high-end Nomu that we see in the VATS. So there's a chance that there's literally a monster that was prototyped in Vigilantes that's going to appear in the main storyline. So you have these things that are tying in addition to that, as a part of world building, you get to encounter one of the most famous heroes from America at the time, which was 5 years ago, or it's 4 or 5 years before the main story is where Vigilantes is placed right now. Well, we also just had a time skip, which another thing, it's written like an actual series with its own plans, and so time skip. But the point is that you have these Nomu set up, you have the 6 thing, you have the world building that comes with Captain Celebrity, who's the character's name, and that even gives us insight into the justice system of the Hero Society and the way it works as far as how much rights different parties have within the context of the verse. The fact that Captain Celebrity is from America gives you a specific snapshot into another country. So if you wanted to know about other countries and different places like that, then Vigilantes literally has some of the material for you. If you remember, the police officer says, the police swore that they wouldn't just weaponize their quirks, and that's completely valid. You actually get an explanation on what happens when police officers use quirks, that kind of interaction, whether or not they can actually go ahead and do it. The way, in addition, something that I also forgot. There's a lot of content within the series, if you wanted to see Ingenium actually be useful instead of just stuck in a chair and being Ida's motivation, and instead wanted to see what made Tensei actually inspiring, that's in Vigilantes. Because he interacts with the MC a decent chunk, especially in the beginning. Sukauchi's actually also a character that pops up a decent bit in Vigilantes. But there's a lot of characters that if you've been interested in some of like the more investigative aspects, or you've been looking for or even if you've just been more invested in finding out world building or seeing different examples of foreshadowing and things that are tied into the series, because if you find a lot of these things surprising, or especially if you're really upset that the Aizawa flashback is not in the main material, you have to realize something very important. Theoretically, you read My Hero Academia on the Viz app sometimes. If you're the kind of person who makes it a point to go back and read the official translation so that you have the accurate intent that Horikoshi wanted, for example, Endeavor saying, I killed Toya, where he just like straight up says, I killed Toya in some scanlations. But in the Viz, he says, I might as well have killed Toya, and then you still have weirdos going on long rants, for 4 or 5 tweets because they want to rant about these scanlations. So, assuming you are actually checking the Viz to make sure you're right, you're in the same app. Just go ahead and read it. It's actually an enjoyable series. Knuckle Duster, you will love. You get more foreshadowing, backstories, and get to show like the ways All For One was moving behind. We're also covering mutant discrimination. Actually pops up a lot in this series. Now that I think about it, in fact, even the chapter that came out recently, back the last one that came out, kind of hinted at that topic again. So all around, there's multiple reasons from just getting plot points that you didn't know about, to seeing certain forms of fan service, such as like actually getting to see Fat Gum in action, getting better characterization for people like Tensei, who, even though, yes, Ida tells us is inspiring, it's nice to have it actually shown why people feel that way or why he would think that highly of his brother. So, if you are like some of my buddies that weren't checking out Vigilantes, I hope that me giving you kind of an example of a lot of the stuff within the series and the way it contributes to the main body and the fact that it's canon in general will help you decide to go ahead and read Vigilantes. With that being said, you guys have a wonderful day. Anaki out.